There are so many credit card strategies out there that trying to figure out which one would be the best for you can be a little bit overwhelming. Not only are there very powerful cashback strategies where you could earn 5% cashback on everything or more, but there are also strategies to maximize points and miles for even higher value. And don't forget about considering whether you should focus all of your spending in one points ecosystem or if it would be better to diversify across multiple rewards programs. But I have a solution to simplify all of this. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create your own best credit card strategy in 2025 using my own credit card portfolio as an example. So when it comes to earning cashback versus points and miles, it turns out that you don't have to pick one or the other. In fact, you could create a hybrid setup that takes advantage of both the simplicity of cashback, but also leverage the opportunity of points and miles for incredible travel redemptions. But one of the issues that comes up is that while you could create your own perfect setup to maximize every individual spending category, it may end up being 5, 10, or maybe even 20 cards or more. And so while having a portfolio of so many cards may maximize value, from a practical perspective, this isn't realistic for most of us, myself included. There has to be some balance and some level of simplicity for you to truly enjoy and not to get annoyed by your credit card setup for your everyday spending. And this is why credit card trifectas are so popular. While you may get the most simplicity with a 2% cashback catch-all credit card for all your purchases, there's definitely money being left on the table. Shout out to my boy, Chad's Money Minutes. But when you add a second and third card to that catch-all card, you can capture a lot more categories that's higher than a 2% cashback equivalent. Now you would think that with each additional card, the complexity increases linearly, but in practice, the complexity actually increases exponentially. As you can see from this graph of an exponential curve, when you add your second and third card, it's still on the leftmost horizontal part of the graph, so not much more complexity. But as you add your fourth card, fifth card, and beyond, you can see how the complexity starts to increase very, very quickly. And of course, these are my own personal feelings about complexity, and you may find it to be easy to manage a 5 card or even a 10 card setup without an issue. And if it was just spending multipliers, I'd probably agree with that. But with increasing annual fees and more annoying statement credits, complexity will find you at one point or another. Okay, so that's all well and good, but I know that as someone who's watching this video, you probably don't have just 3 credit cards, and I certainly don't have just 3 credit cards either. When I say credit card trifectas are the perfect number of cards, I'm referring specifically to cards that you use for most of your everyday spending. And that leads me to identify the first of the 3 categories that you can use to create your own best credit card setup, and that would be your core credit card setup. As I mentioned, these are the cards that you use for most of your everyday spending, including categories like restaurants, groceries, transit, and gas. And within your core credit card setup, there are 3 types of cards: your specialty card, or cards for specific category spend; your general card that captures a lot of categories on a single card; and a catch-all card for everything else. So starting with the specialty cards, this would be the card or group of cards where you maximize the multiplier where you spend the most amount of money, with the goal being 5% cashback equivalent or higher. Now I love the City Custom Cash card for this slot because the 5% categories offered on this card consist of the typical everyday spending categories that you'd expect. Specifically, this card covers restaurants, gas stations, grocery stores, select travel, and select transit, as well as some other categories at the 5% cashback level with a cap of $500 per billing cycle. Now there are other 5% cards that could work in this slot as well, including the AAA Daily Advantage card for 5% cashback on groceries on up to $10,000 spent per calendar year, the AAA Travel Advantage card that earns 5% cashback on gas and EV charging stations on up to $7,000 spent per calendar year, and the US Bank Cash Plus card that earns 5% cashback on your first $2,000 in combined eligible purchases each quarter on 2 categories that you choose. And of course, we can't forget one of my favorite cards where if you're Platinum Honors with Bank of America, the Customized Cash Rewards card earns 5.25% cashback on up to $2,500 per quarter in your selected category. I also want to point out that after you maximize these 5% or 5.25% categories, all these cards earn 1% cashback thereafter. But we don't want to spend more than the cap on these cards because it's better to use a catch-all card for this purpose instead. Now, the great thing about all these specialty cards that I mentioned earlier is that they have no annual fee, and you get pure value back with the select category expenses that you put on these cards. Of course, those are just cash back cards, but you could also use flexible point earning cards with an annual fee if it made sense for your situation. For example, if you spent a lot of money on food purchases, the Amex Gold card should be a great specialty card earning 4x points back on both those categories with a $50,000 yearly cap on restaurants and a $25,000 yearly cap on US supermarkets. Okay, so those are some examples of specialty cards, but the next card is pretty important, and it's the general card, which will capture a lot of other credit card categories that aren't covered by your specialty card. Now, this card may not get you that 5% or 5x equivalent per category, but the goal here is to have a card that covers a lot of categories at an elevated level on a single card. The three cards that come to my mind that fits this slot quite nicely are the Wells Fargo Autograph card, the Citi Premier card, and the American Express Green card. All of these cards cover at least 3 categories at the 3x level, and so that's what I'd consider to be the minimum standard for a general card. With that in mind, another card that could fit in this category would be the Capital One Saver card, which earns 3x points back at grocery stores, on dining, entertainment, and popular streaming services. And like I mentioned earlier, the final card would be the catch-all credit card, which would, at minimum, have a 2x or 2% cashback equivalent for all other purchases that weren't covered by the 2 other types of cards. A very popular card that fits this category, specifically that earns a flexible point currency, is the Capital One Venture X that earns 2x miles on all purchases, not covered by its other categories, but it's also a luxury light travel credit card with lounge access and other travel-related perks and benefits. Now, 2% is great and all for a catch-all credit card, but in 2025, there are more cards than ever that earn even more than that. If you're Platinum Honors with Bank of America, the Unlimited Cash card, Travel Rewards card, Premium Rewards card, and Premium Rewards Elite card all can earn unlimited 2.625x points back on all your catch-all purchases. The Robinhood Gold card earns 3% cash back on everything as long as you're a Robinhood Gold member. And the US Bank Smartly credit card earns up to 4% cash back on all purchases, provided that you have $100,000 in assets with US Bank. And we can't forget one of our favorite credit union cards, which is the Alliant Credit Union Visa, which earns 2.5% cash back on the first $10,000 in purchases per billing cycle when you have a checking account with them with Tier 1 rewards. Okay, so those are the 3 card types that should make up your core credit card setup. So now that we know this, how does this work in my situation? Well, you can see from the top row here that between my wife and I, we have 2 customized cash rewards cards, which earns 5.25% cash back on online purchases and 5.25% cash back on gas. One Chasing Cash card, which earns 5x UR points back on cable, internet, and phone services, and a Citi Custom Cash card, which earns 5x points back on fitness memberships. We also have the Built card, which earns 1x points back on rent, which isn't an elevated multiplier exactly, but it's better than earning no points at all. And so those 5 cards make up our specialty cards. We then have the US Bank Altitude Reserve, which earns 4.5x points back on Apple Pay, which is our general card. And we have the US Bank Smartly card, which earns 4% cash back on everything else, which is our catch-all credit card. And I know what you're thinking. I just made a big deal about having only 3 credit cards in your core setup, and I have 7. So what's that all about? Well, like I said earlier, I have those 5 cards that fit in the specialty card category, the US Bank Altitude Reserve as my general card, and the US Bank Smartly card as my catch-all card. So this is more of a pseudo trifecta with multiple cards making up that specialty card category. I'll also mention that the only 2 cards that I keep on me physically is the US Bank Smartly card as well as the Built MasterCard as a backup, as all the other cards are either on Apple Pay or they're billed automatically on their respective 5% or 5x categories. Okay, so all you really need is that core credit card setup to get great value back on our spending, but as credit card enthusiasts, we know we can do better because there are so many credit cards with great benefits. And this brings me to the second category of cards that can help shape your best credit card strategy, and that would be your secondary setup. Now, these are very powerful cards that can really elevate the way you travel as well as the things you do in your everyday life. But it's important to be careful with these cards because they typically come with very high annual fees that you then need to offset by using the card's credits and benefits. So what cards fit in the secondary setup? Well, the 3 broad categories that I'd place here would be cards for select spending, airline cards, and hotel cards. So as an example, a select spending card would be a card like the Amex Platinum. As we all know, the Platinum card is a card with a $695 annual fee with tons of statement credits and benefits. but it also earns 5x points back on flights booked directly with airlines on up to $500,000 per calendar year, as well as 5x points back on hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Another card that would fit this description would be the Chase Sapphire Reserve, with 10x points back on hotels and car rentals, and 5x points back on flights that are purchased through Chase Travel if that's your preferred method of booking. So those are some select spending cards, and the next type of card that fits in your secondary setup are airline cards. So typically these aren't cards you use for spending unless it's needed to access an airline-specific benefit. Most airline cards are great for those entry-level status tier benefits, for example, priority boarding and free checked bags for you and others on your itinerary. So these are great if you're not really a frequent flyer, but you fly maybe 4 to 5 times per year, which is enough to make these benefits count, but you don't fly enough to earn airline status specifically. And if you get to the higher tier airline cards, now you're looking at benefits like lounge access, companion fares, and the companion pass from Southwest. But my favorite set of cards that fit into the secondary setup would be hotel credit cards. Hotel credit cards really elevate your travel experience and value by giving you elite status as well as free night awards. Some hotel cards like the Chase Marriott Bonvoy Boundless or the Chase IHG Premier card both offer anniversary free night awards where you receive a free night after holding the card for a year. But other hotel cards like the American Express Hilton Surpass card give you the opportunity to spend $15,000 on the card to earn an uncapped Hilton Free Night Award, which is not for everyone, but is certainly a very valuable benefit to some. Of course, we can't forget about what is probably the best hotel credit card out there, which is the American Express Hilton Aspire card, which comes with an annual Hilton Free Night Award as soon as you get the card, and the opportunity to earn even more free night awards depending on how much you spend on the card in a calendar year. And depending on the hotel program, it may be a good idea to use hotel credit cards when staying at their respective properties to earn a lot of points from those stays. For example, if you hold the Hilton Aspire card, you earn 34x Hilton points back per dollar spent, or if you have an IHG Premier card, you earn 26x IHG points back per dollar spent. So in this case, your hotel cards also act as select spending cards as we discussed earlier. Okay, so how does this look like in my own credit card setup? Well, if you look at the second row of my credit card portfolio here, these cards are the ones that represent my secondary setup. You can see that the Amex Platinum is used for Centurion Lounge access as well as 5x points back on flights. We have the Marriott Bonvoy Brilliant and Bonvoy Business cards for an anniversary 85K and 35K free night awards respectively, as well as Platinum Elite status from the Bonvoy Brilliant. We have the Chase Ritz-Carlton card for Sapphire Lounge access, Priority Pass Lounge access, and an anniversary 85K free night award. We have the Chase IHG Premier card to earn 26x points back on IHG properties and an anniversary free night award. And we have both the Southwest Priority and Performance Business cards since we went for the Southwest Companion Pass this year. And so this brings me to the third category of cards for your best credit card strategy, and that's your bench credit card setup. Now, there are two main types of cards in this category. Cards that you keep around mainly to help your credit score through your average age of accounts, as well as rotating category cards. So as your length of credit history is 15% of your FICO credit score, it's important to keep this number as high as possible. And as we get more cards to fill out our core and secondary setups, it becomes increasingly important to downgrade cards that we no longer use to this category to help offset the average age of accounts due to those newer cards. Of course, it's best if the cards are downgraded to no annual fee versions because then it doesn't cost you anything to keep the card open. But if there isn't a no annual fee downgrade path and the card has an annual fee, it's really important to weigh the pros and cons of that particular card to see if it's truly worth it to keep it open. And the second type of card for this section is your rotating category cards. Now, depending on the quarter, these cards would either be in your bench setup, or if you're using that rotating category, these cards could also appear in your core credit card setup as a regular spending card, at least for that particular quarter. And one example of this type of card is the Chase Freedom Flex. This card has no annual fee and earns 5x points back on rotating categories on up to $1,500 in spend per quarter. So this card could be very valuable as a specialty card in your core setup when the right spending category comes along. But if it's an off quarter, then these cards can safely sit in your bench setup until the right time. And so let's see how this plays out in my own credit card setup, and my bench setup is shown here in this third row. The first two cards here, my Amex Blue Cash Everyday and my Barclaycard or Regal MasterCard both exist purely to lengthen my average age of accounts with about 20 years of payment history and 15 years of payment history, respectively. The United Gateway card is a no annual fee card that I downgraded to from the United Explorer card. I used to fly United much more often when I lived in Boston during my younger years, but now I fly more on Southwest, so I decided to downgrade this card, and it now exists in my bench setup with about 9 years of payment history. And we also have the Chase Freedom card and Chase Freedom Flex cards as part of our bench setup as these rotating category cards, and these cards are ready to be deployed to the core credit card setup when a good quarterly category comes along. Okay, so those are the 3 categories that will make up your best credit card strategy in 2025. And so when you're thinking about applying for a new credit card or planning out your credit card roadmap, think about what card goes into which category and what the card's purpose is going to be. You may just be starting out and trying to optimize that core credit card setup with your favorite credit card duo or trifecta. Or maybe you're more advanced and you're trying to fill out that secondary setup with the Marriott Free Night Strategy, Ritz-Carlton card, or maybe even going for the Hilton credit card ladder. There are so many possibilities to create your own best credit card strategy, but this is a great framework to help keep you organized. As for me, my core credit card setup was updated for 2025, and to see what's in my wallet for the first quarter of this year, check out this video next.